So I'd like you to ask yourself the question, where in my life am I not honouring the self? Because we are moving into a time now where honouring the self is becoming of the most import at this time. In that, in order for us to be a conscious participant in our ascension, the ascension of consciousness that is happening right now within us individually and within us collectively, and also within the planetary and galactical systems. And central to that is us being in our authenticity. And we can only be in our authenticity when we are honouring the self. When we are doing things that are in alignment with the self, with the soul self. So when we ask ourselves this question, we can start to bring into our conscious awareness those parts of our life that we are dishonouring the self. We are moving against our integrity. We are going against that which is within alignment of the self. So when we do that, when we do not self-honour for whatever those reasons are, we are basically draining our energetic field. We are unplugging ourselves from our source, from our charge. So when we are self-honouring, we are charging up our energetic field. We are charging up our light body, and that is going to, one, help us ascend in consciousness, but two, it's going to help us align with our destiny, and it's going to bring so much more ease and flow into our lives. Now, at first, when we start self-honouring, it can create some chaos, because there'll be areas in our life where we have been not self-honouring and we've been feeding the false self, the ego. And as we stop feeding the ego and we start to plug into the soul, into the true self, and honour the self, then the ego can create some resistance and some kickback and come up with all sorts of fear-based scenarios as to why you should continue to dishonour the self and to continue to feed the ego. So when we do start self-honouring, it does take courage. It means that we have to move into courage and use courage to self-honour. And when we are doing this, when we look around our lives and look at the places that we are dishonouring the self, and we start to make changes to honour the self, and we use courage to do that, then we don't need to be, we don't need to do it all at once. We can do it step by step, little by little. Little by little, we start to pull back our energetic fields from the false self that we feed through dishonouring. So we start to little by little pull back our source power and light up our energy field and align and start to draw into our reality our destined higher path. Now, when we are dishonouring the self, when we are not in our authenticity, and we are feeding that false self, well, we are feeding the false self programs like, I am not enough, I do not matter, and I am not important. And this is a huge artificial program that's been inserted into the collective consciousness to move us away from honouring the self, to make us feel that it's selfish to honour the self, that we should put everybody else's needs before our own. But I want you just to think about the insanity of that belief system. Because when we put everybody else's needs above ourselves, again, we feed the false self, we feed that artificial program, and we move further away from the true organic self where our power is, and we create this loop, this feed that continues to validate the false self, continues to validate core wounds that are inserted by the false self, i.e. I am not enough, I am not good enough. And what we have is we have a collective humanity walking around where everyone is dishonoring, well, obviously everyone, like, not everyone is, but a lot of people are dishonoring the self and putting everybody else's needs before their own. So nobody's needs actually get met. So we end up with a collective and a society where nobody's needs get met, where everybody is operating from a place of the false self, not being good enough, not being important, not mattering, and also from a place of misery. It feeds the misery program, because how can we truly be fulfilled? How can we truly light up and use that light to impact the whole if we are always out of alignment with the self, if we're never honoring the self? So if I am doing everything to honor somebody else and dishonor myself in that, then I am miserable. And if that person is also honoring another self and dishonoring their self, then they are miserable. And that's how we create these misery programs, and we feed the false self that makes us believe that our needs are not important, that we should honor someone else's needs before ours. But that is not truth. Now, am I saying that we should, by honoring the self, that doesn't mean that we have license to harm another? Absolutely not. But it's about being in alignment with our integrity. It's not about doing something because out of duty, because we feel, well, we should do that. If we don't do that, we're going to be shamed, we're going to be ostracized. No, that's when we need to step into courage and use courage and align with what is in our heart and start recognizing that our soul speaks to us that way, that our soul has a destiny and it has a path. And if we self-honor, so we start to find what makes us feel good and we start to honor that, as we start to do that, well, we light up, we charge up that light body, and we start to attract to us those that are in alignment with our destined path. And yes, as we start to self-honor, which takes courage, it may mean that some people in our life, some experiences in our life fade out of our lives because they're no longer in resonance with where we are, because we're no longer feeding the false self. So in doing this, not only does it light up our life and mean that we can give from a place of being overflowing, but it also helps the other. You're also in service to the other by doing that, because you're not putting on a false mask. You're not acting from a place of pretense. So in you aligning with your authenticity, well, it gives permission for another to also align with their authenticity. And we start this ripple moving out, and we stop this pretense, and we stop feeding and growing that false self, and we start feeding and growing the true self, the true organic soul self. And everything in our life does get better, becomes more flow, becomes more ease. We start to be led on our path. We're connecting more to our guidance system. So we're not only helping the self, but we are also helping the collective to move out of the consciousness that we've been trapped in, of fear, of not enoughness, into the truth of who we are, unity. We are all connected to one, and through dishonoring the self, we dishonor the other also. So have a think about your life right now. I've been working on this for a little while with some clients, and the other day something came to me when I was like, do you know what, I'm doing something and it's not 100% in alignment with the truth of who I am. Whilst I had an attachment to that thing, I realised I was wasting my precious energy because I wasn't really giving it the attention it deserved anyway, because it wasn't fully in alignment with the self. So I just decided to let it go, because I decided in that moment that right now, in this now moment that we all find ourselves, I don't have time to be focusing my energy on something that I am not 100% aligned with. And that was something quite simple for me to pull back my energy, realign back, and let that go. Now, there will be places in our lives that is not so easy to do. So I do understand that there may be places that we are self-honoring, maybe in a job that we are in. And it's not as simple as just waking up today. Well, it can be actually, but I do appreciate that we do have bills to pay and things like that. We may not be able to instantly move out of something that is not honouring itself, but we can start acknowledging where we are not in alignment with these bigger things, and we can start opening up by acknowledging, accepting that we're out of alignment, by asking for guidance from our higher self. So I'm going to link a few videos that will help go deeper in this for the areas that are more difficult, where we feel a little bit more trapped perhaps, or a little bit more stuck by the false self. But by just acknowledging those areas, that's when we basically give the signal to the universe, right, I am ready now. I am ready for you to guide me to free myself from this mind prison, because it's all part of the false ego, part of the false self. And the soul self, as we align, well, it has all of the solutions that we need, all of the answers are within. So ask yourself that question. Start to align in the areas that are simpler and easy to do. Perhaps you've got something you feel you should do, some project that you've been holding on your list for ages but you never get it done. Start by freeing yourself of those things, and then you can start to get into the swing, and you can start to look then to those bigger areas in the life. Perhaps it's a relationship that you're holding on to that you know is no longer serving you, or a job, and then you can start to align with self-honouring in those areas too. Thank you.